Colorful
Life on Colourful Radio.
Good morning, and welcome to Owning It with iOla. I am, of course, your host, iOla. And this morning, I'm joined by two amazing people, as always. Only having amazing people on my show. I have with me again my sister, Akosua Ofusuhene. Akosua, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me back.
You're welcome. And also I have Dean Okai Sr. from ADPAC. Welcome, Dean.
Feeling welcome. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. So we've had a very eventful week again. As we've always, as we discussed previously, there seems to be this whole thing of dragging us emotionally as a community. And this time, this was in the form of a 258-page report on race and ethnic disparity in the UK, produced by Dr. Tony Sewell and his colleagues, which has been met with much controversy because obviously it's a load of nonsense, basically. We're not going to put any other terms to it. It's a load of nonsense. However, we're actually concerned with us as a community creating our own narratives and what that actually looks like for us. And so I've invited Dean and Akosua on to give their take on what we should be doing and how we should be being in response to not just this report, but things that come up to trigger our traumas in the plight of us striving to live and exist as Black human beings in this country. So, Akosua, firstly, we've had lots of conversations offline. What was your immediate response to, this report once you saw it kind of being shared around?
It was really interesting, and I'll confess I haven't read the whole report. I've read various summaries, and I've also had family members who were interested in reading the whole thing say the parts that they found were salient for themselves. So I shall confess that. What I found personally was it felt like there was a new narrative that was going around. I interviewed on my own show 3 senior Black police women about 3 weeks ago, and the magic lines, "Britain is not institutionally racist. We just have some racist people," were said on my show.
Right.
So to hear it again feels like this is, and that was actually said by the UK's highest Black policewoman officer. So it feels like this is the new line that's to be bandied around. So it feels to me a bit like that's what this report was about, just getting that new narrative everywhere, which is great for the machine, because then we can all be, we've had how long going on and on and on about BAME. So now we can have ages now going on about, no, Britain is institutionally racist.
Yeah.
No, it isn't. Yes, it is. And round and round and round we go over things that make no real difference to our daily lives. But there are things in there that do make a difference to our daily lives, and I think if anything need to be concentrated on, it's those. So I saw stuff to do with education and the teaching of Black history. Now, from friends of mine who have children in schools, they've been saying for about the last 3 years that Black History Month is getting less and less in schools anyway. So it seems like this report is kind of underlying that thing of, we're starting to phase out Black History Month in schools. My only reaction to that is now we have the internet. We've all been at home for ages. We've all got used to internet learning. So now we should just have a flourishing of Black supplementary schools.
Absolutely. And I know that just to segue into bringing Dean into the conversation, because I know he'll agree with that. But firstly, Dean, tell us a little bit about ADPAC and, in terms of what Akosua was just saying about the need for supplementary schools and what ADPAC represents for us as a community.
Absolutely. Firstly, I'd just like to give the sentiment of agreeing wholeheartedly with what Akosua has just said. ADPAC is an umbrella organization established to coordinate our national activity. So grassroots organizations, professionals, advocates, and our social commentators, so that we are a lot more organized and effective than we've been across all areas of our lives. Now, numbers don't make us powerful, because our Eastern European distant cousins, the descendants of the Khazarian Empire, are only 246,000 in the UK. And people of African origin are nearly 3 million. The difference between us and them is our organizational capacity. And the fact that we are collectively inadequate is wholly based on our lack of organization. So to refer to what Akua was saying earlier, absolutely we need supplementary schools, but we need to recognize them as a mainstay for our children. And actually our educational professionals need to come together, which is where ADPAC comes in, because our role is to put policy into practice. And that's what we're not doing. So just to digress back to the report, if Britain isn't institutionally racist, then the example I'm going to give you of institutional racism will mean absolutely nothing. So Theresa May was Prime Minister, and as Prime Minister, she made a decision to create a hostile environment for African Caribbean people in the United Kingdom. Her Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, was the tool who would execute that. So what Amber Rudd did was she ordered the destruction, the illegal destruction of naturalization documents of the Windrush generation and the children of those Windrush arrivers who were invited to rebuild Britain after World War II. So that's in the NHS, the London Underground, the civil service, and all the jobs that English people didn't want to do, knowing that a large amount of English men had been killed. What she then did was further coordinate with law enforcement, the DWP, the Department for Work and Pensions, to stop any benefits they might have got after they'd lost their jobs because they said they weren't legal, the NHS and local authority. So they completely isolated these people, asset stripped them, kidnapped them, and then deported them. So that is institutional racism in a nutshell, from policy all the way through the delivery. It is going to be relegated to the sidelines. But outside of government and any kind of institutions within the English authority, we can say and do what we like. And the backlash that they're seeing is not coordinated, but our effective communication and response to them. And we're letting them know that it's not going down. We know that it's not true. And that 258-page spell, a spell being magic, magic is merely the ability to shift consciousness from one state to another. And within that, we've all been shifted into confusion and anger, which is merely applied behavioral psychology. So I'll leave it there. But that applied behavioral psychology is to keep us in a state of perpetual terror so that we react to whatever their line is for the day.
Absolutely. And I was going to say that, you spoke about the backlash and the anger and the fear mongering. That seems to be our general, reactionary response to whatever happens. Like Akua said, it might be this report, it might be something else that will happen next week. And it's across all sectors, whether it's politics, whether it's, commercial marketing. It always seems to be an aim, an objective to trigger us emotionally. So with that in mind, we've had lots of conversations offline, Akua, as well, about what the best protocol, if you like, should be, that we should be, our response as a community. What would you advise in terms of our state? What should we be doing when we're seeing these reports and things come up and actually feeling angered? But what would you say that should be the way that we should actually respond to these things?
I think the truth of the matter is we are 500 years in to a project that we didn't start, but it's a project that we find ourselves in. And so we need a level of maturity to really hone in what that really means when we say 500 years. And to really start soaking in, and there's a lot of grief there that needs to come out in what that actually means when you're going back 500 years, what that means to think about slavery in terms of the strongest, most able-bodied people to be taken away from the continent, put on various little islands and in the middle of, you know, other countries and continents they had no knowledge of, the ones left at home also then living under the subjugation of these people. Because I think sometimes when we talk about the slave trade, there's this idea that after the people were taken away, Africans just kind of carried on their merry business. They didn't. They had kind of 200 years of open warfare across the continent with various different European powers. My people alone, the Asante people, fought the British 7 times over that time. The story is replicated across Africa, these constant wars that ended up then with colonialism. And now we have what we have now, which is actually our home countries being destabilized by these powers so that the able-bodied are once again forced to these countries to work because everybody just wants to live. So that's the backdrop within which we find ourselves. And in a way, we have to really have that close to mind. Because when you have the full enormity of what that means, then when these kind of reports come out, you understand it's like a penny in a £1,000 trick. So we've got to have a vision of the enormity of this trick that's been going on for so long, that is now carrying on and hoping to carry on for so long. And we also have to start to go back to what are we? We are melanated people. What is melanin? Melanin is a product or an element that works best under stress. Melanin is chaos. And so what that means is for us, there has to be a kind of sight-changing understanding. When people are melanin recessive, they are a lot more equipped to deal with this physical understanding. They're a lot more one-trick pony. Our melanin makes us the types of people where we need to be educated by everything. You know, we're not maths, English, science, geography. We're all of it. It's fun. And so we need to start having more of an understanding of melanin, have an understanding that this stress is, it's like, this is the stone that sharpens our knife. So but we also have to do with the grief, because the grief in these stories keep us so much in this physical world that's telling us who we are, and we're fighting to be recognized and we're fighting to be seen. And it's so nonsense, because the project didn't start about people not seeing us. The project was theft and control. So once we understand that, we can take ourselves out of these things. It doesn't matter if the UK government says it is institutionally racist or not. It doesn't matter, because the project is about subjugation.
Yes, absolutely.
So we need that level of maturity, but that can only come from dealing with our grief. And that means to get out, we have to go in. I would even advise any Black person who's really, really wanting a different world to almost check out of this world and do the inside work. Because without the inside work, you can't actually see reality straight.
And there's also something to be said about, you know, the intergenerational connection. I know that when Dean, you did you had your conversation with Ted, he spoke about, where are the elders? And actually, conversely, with this report, it seems like there's a disconnect between the older generation who are saying, who are basically where these kind of schools of thoughts are coming from in terms of the Tony Sewells of the world and his colleagues saying that, it's not as bad as in the 90s and 70s. And you've obviously got the younger generation of the Black Lives Matter movement from which this report was produced, who are saying, no, actually it is. And they're still feeling very much that whole residue of that anger. And it's kind of like it's a cycle. So actually what you're saying is so poignant. I don't know what that looks like in terms of addressing that, but Dean's shaking his head here. He's sat with me. Go ahead, Dean.
Yeah, that's slightly conflating the issue, because it's not an intergenerational thing. It's a case of identifying somebody like Tony Sewell who carries water for a white supremacist institution like the British government. But I tend to have more empathy these days because I know that we don't support our advocates. Very few of these people start out like this, and they get co-opted because white supremacist institutions socially and financially reward the treachery of the collective, and it becomes an individual solution.
Right.
So if you imagine you took somebody who worked very hard, had all the qualifications like the doctorate, like running any of these race industry organizations, and gave them every single accolade possible to give an African Caribbean person, they would still have zero power within their halls. So if anybody thinks I'm wrong, go and check whoever has all of the accolades possible of acquiring.
Tony Sewell himself has a lot of accolades.
He has a lot.
Yeah.
There are people with even more than him.
Yeah.
And they still have zero tangible power within the British system, although they have every title, every accolade that Britain could possibly give them. And their opinions are irrelevant in terms of the halls of power.
Yes. Actually, on that note of power, I know that this is a favourite subject of Akosua, who's been studying the nuances of power and how we use it. And as race is very much about power and the constructs and how we basically unconsciously volunteer our rights and our sovereignty away, what would you say about that in terms of basically harnessing our power in this dynamics, Akosua?
Yeah, I wanted to say, just in reference to people like Dr. Tony Sewell and other people in the system, we have to realise that people work for the people who pay them.
Yes.
It's
who pays the piper to tune.
Yeah. So, if I let's say I take over this estate that I'm in, let's say I take it over, I can employ somebody to sweep the streets and clean the hallways. They work for me. Now it's to the benefit of the people who live here until I say to him to stop cleaning the stairwells. He works for me. So I think part of our maturity is really understanding those things. All the African government heads all go to Oxford and Cambridge and the top schools in America. That's who they work for. The all of their bodyguards are trained in Israel. This is the reality, and this is why in many ways we have to go in. So, okay, what does it mean in terms of power? What happens is when you're brought up as a woman, as a Black and brown person, there's a lot of things about your position in terms of power that you were never taught in terms of somebody tells you to be scared of white people or not to feel as big in front of them. But you learn that by osmosis, by being in the world, seeing your parents, seeing how it all works. So you don't even know when the opportunities come and you completely give away your power or they take away your power. And this is why the work begins inwards first, because it doesn't matter how much you stand in front of the mirror and you're saying, I am beautiful, my black skin is great. You can do all the affirmations, but if you don't understand about how power works when you're in front of the other, they're able to sap it away from you continually. An example I'll give is we've all seen these American police who are constantly killing black people on the road in America. And you kind of think, why did they argue? You know what these people are like.
Yes.
And the reason why they do argue is because they are acting from grief and stress and not understanding power. When you understand power, because power acts on you always in the moment.
Yeah.
So we're all ruled by, you know, the big power that we can't see, the strings, and it's a pyramid, and we don't know the people at the top, but everything's drip, 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 drip down. And you know, we're in a system that says that the black and brown are at the bottom of this pyramid, but how it enacts on you is one-on-one.
Yes.
You know, there is the big thing to do with schools, to do with housing, but it's one-on-one. And when you don't understand power, you don't understand how to have a different relationship with that one-on-one interaction that could go your way. And it's training. I don't think it's something that you can just, you know, some people are probably lucky enough to be the types of person that maybe they instinctively understand power. But I've been really pushing a white woman's book. She's called Cassia Urbaniak, and her book is Unbound. And she learnt about power from two very different things, but it really works. She was working as a dominatrix, and she was using the money to actually fund her training as a Taoist nun.
Okay.
Now, with those two things, I know it's crazy, but with learning how to read power and take power and negotiate in power, she was able to become, by the age of, I think, 23, she was the highest paid dominatrix in America and training people all over the place. And it was her students who said to her, what you're teaching us is I'm now being paid double what I was being paid. I'm now doing this, I'm now doing that. And she started to train more and more and more women. And I say every black person needs to be signing up to that course, because we don't have no elders, we don't have anybody teaching us about power one-to-one. And I said it before on your show so many times. There were questions when my son was getting into trouble at school. There were questions that I now would ask that didn't even enter my head then, because I didn't understand about power. There are things I would have taught my son then that I didn't, because I didn't understand about power. When we as a community talk about we're losing our young people, we think it's about teaching them about history. No. It's about making them understand how power works. So in that one-to-one situation with that racist teacher, they know how to take back the power. They know when they can't take back the power, because you need to know that as well. But the difference is it takes you out of your feelings.
Yes. So one thing you mentioned before is, just to interject, that you mentioned about asking the right questions. And I think that that's something that's pertinent to us. We don't stop and ask questions like, what's really going on here? Or, do you know what I mean? To take a stance from putting the onus back on the other person or on the institution or whatever it may be. And you mentioned last time about actually knowing the right questions to ask instead of just reacting to something. So I want to put it to both of you. What are the questions that we should be asking in light of this report? Obviously, one of them is, what do we do next? And that's an obvious one. But are there any others that we should be fundamentally asking of ourselves even?
Personally, oh, sorry. No, carry on.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Akosua.
All right. I mean, personally, like I said before, the only thing I think to take away from this particular report is how do we educate our children? Everything else I think is nonsense. It's good for us to know that the new narrative is Britain is not institutionally racist. Yeah. Well, we don't need to argue with anybody about that because, as I say, this is a 500-year project. So, you know, we would be crazy to even argue with anybody about that. Let them say what they want because we know what's going on. Yeah. I think it's important. If people are looking for practical things to do, there's a famous Black philosopher called Neely Fuller Jr. Yes. There's so many of his audio on YouTube. I'd say everybody needs to get the book to understand the 9 areas of life and how power is acted on us in the 9 areas of life. When you understand that, all these reports can come and go. Because they're not actually important. What they are tools of gaslighting.
Yes, absolutely.
So we need to not even, you know, it's good that there are people to analyze them. Let them analyze them and let's know what do we do next in view of the fact that we understand it's a 500-year project and in the 9 areas of life.
Yeah.
That's all we need to know. And all we need to do is, if anything, is point out the way in which the system is using the new report.
Right.
And, you know, and slot that into place.
Yes.
This whole report is about spreading the new story, Britain is not institutionally racist. Yes. That's it.
Yeah.
So that's all we need to even say. Oh, new report came out. Yeah. They want to tell us Britain isn't institutionally racist. Done. Nothing more to say.
But it's getting us all on the same page to understand that, you know, and I think language plays a massive part in this, in us creating our own narrative for our own agenda in terms of understanding that this is a 500-year long project that we're a part of, and that, you know, we need to look outside of it, you know, or look at it critically rather than just being emotionally embroiled in it. So yeah, I think that's a brilliant advice in terms of the practical steps. But I know that also, Dean, you have some suggestions in form of the work that ADPAC is setting out to do.
Absolutely. I'll just concur with Akosua, but we aren't part of a 500-year project. We are the 500-year project.
Yeah.
And because they understand basically how our psychological processes work, we are consistently involved in that Hegelian dialectic of problem, us reacting, and then them creating the solution. Who called it. And what it's about is understanding sovereignty, and that sovereignty isn't the pieces of paper that an expert is going to give you. It's not the process you have to go through. It is making the decision that I am going to maintain all of my inalienable rights under God as a decision, and that you aren't going to transgress them.
Yes.
This is exactly what they did in Haiti. They owned it. And when we step outside of their walls, their frameworks of power, and we create our own, we are capable of creating an alternative for every single area of life. And again, Akosua called it with Neely Fuller. You could play any of those tapes from 30 years ago today, and they all perfectly apply. You could apply them to any situation. And it's for this reason, that knowing that that report was to give birth to a policy of benign neglect. So to put a policy of benign neglect into practice, which is to totally ignore every single issue that African Caribbeans have and throw up some distraction, because Britain isn't racist, they have told us that we are now in Trump's first term, what African Americans should have done. And that is for all of us to come along underneath one umbrella with every single organization.
So that's the equivalent just of BAME here.
No, BAME just means not white. What I'm talking about is the vehicle, which is the whole point of ADPAC as an umbrella. You see, white people will tell you, well, now you're playing. Our media entities have never been able to align under one organizational banner and say, now we're going to get you because you're attacking us.
Yes.
And for every Tony Saw that makes us less safe, they are breaking the community code.
Mm-hmm.
So now we hold them accountable, and we hold them accountable by decimating them where they stand, because
Yes.
they make us less safe. So our sovereignty is about self-preservation, and we haven't done that, because what they do when they criticize us is they can embarrass us out of our position of clarity.
Mm-hmm.
And many of us will cave, not having the correct framework, articulation. And here's a simple code.
Yes.
It's as simple as red means stop, amber means get ready, green means go. Agree,
Red.
adopt,
Mm-hmm.
apply. Do you agree in principle? Yes. Adopt, apply. So if we say sign this petition, 1 million of us just go and sign the petition. The petition in isolation doesn't do anything.
Yes.
Like CCTV, it records evidence. So now when we go forward with a full campaign, we've got digitally evidence-based petition that says 1 million people agree. So your stats that are manipulated don't mean anything.
Mm.
We are the power and the glory. We're no longer in your project. We formed our own project,
Mm-hmm.
and we're our own taskmasters.
Yes. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. A lot there to digest and to, act upon. So in terms of the suggestions that you've both made, or I'll start with you, Dean.
Yeah.
How can people get involved? Because obviously, there's been some calls for people saying that we should write our own report. There's been other people saying that, obviously they've been signing several petitions.
Yeah.
And like you said, the main issue is coming under one umbrella and acting as one unit, like, our distant cousins do.
Yeah.
What's the next, plausible course of action that we should be taking?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of ADPAC, asking us to write a countering report is all part of the Hegelian dialectic of creating the problem, then we react. That's us reacting to what they do. That's irrelevant.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
What we need to do is be aware that we have no allies within government.
Mm.
So the schools to industry pipeline is all about taking charge of our own educational processes for our children, with all youth engagement organizations collaborating in a finely tuned pipeline that creates wraparound care for the African family that focuses on the child. So even if there's a breakdown in the family, our version with an African lens isn't social services that isolates the child. It's child parent intervention, because we want to heal the family. So we have those organizations inside the schools to industry pipeline. If we're in front of a funder now that says, okay, I've got $1 million, here's $1 million, what are you going to do? We can show them a framework for a national rollout that involves all of our intra-agency support that can protect the child. So if that means that our children are protected, that means less crime, and that makes Britain better. So if you Google ADPAC volunteer, you'll find all of the links to actually volunteer with ADPAC. If you are a professional in any area, adpac.net, and you'll go to our section as an organization, or even to become an officer within ADPAC to coordinate all of our organizations nationally. But the key is that we get on code, agree, adopt, apply, realize that we're by ourselves, and give birth to institutions that specifically and exclusively benefit African and African Caribbean people nationally. But here's the thing that separates ADPAC from the race industry organizations, and it is our collaboration with the diaspora region in the African Union, which is our dual interest, because they represent our interests within the African Union. A strong Africa represents strong Africans in the diaspora. And the reason we don't have any power there is because it's not economic. And we have the ability to create the trade missions to make that relationship an economic one. The minute our relationship becomes economic is the minute that Africa's going to start responding to us, because we recognized our sovereignty. We'll become the first delivery partner ahead of Chinese, ahead of Europeans, but it'll be our decision.
Okay. Well, yes, that sounds like a plan that we all need to get on board with. Akosua, what do you have in response to that, or anything that else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a one-man band person.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I think I said to you before on one of your shows that when I worked with psilocybin magic mushrooms, I asked about racism, you know, what is it? How do we get over it? And I was shown that racism is like the salt in the sea. And when you're working to take the salt out of the sea, it's a thankless task. You will die and you will never make it. It's about traversing.
Yeah.
It's about sailing. It's about swimming. It's about building piers. It's about learning how to surf.
I love that analogy. Yeah.
It is there, you know, it's there, and we've got to learn how to work with it. And another time working with a different medicine, I was shown that, you know, this racism story is the stone that sharpens us as knives.
Yes.
You know, so it's a different way of interacting with it. And I've learned as we've gone along that it really is, it's the work of going inside. And I think this story has been so deep and so long that I don't know that we have the kind of psychologists who are out there to be able to really help us. The only thing that I've really found are plant medicines and those compounds to be able to cut through the intergenerational pain. And so I do advocate, I totally advocate the therapeutic use of psychedelics, because the way in which they are able to open your eyes is not something that human beings have been able to do. And this is probably also why in our communities there's been such a big division away from these medicines. I mean, if you go to the if you go and see the Kalahari desert people in South Africa, they have plant medicines for everything. I'm sure people have seen on YouTube, you have the Maasai warriors who are able to walk up to the lion and take the meat from the lion. They do that under the influence, and their power they are able to push outwards. So personally, I think, you know, I believe in another great old teacher of ours called Kalindi Ai. He was the master of taking high doses of psilocybin magic mushrooms. And he used to call it the journey of the alone into the alone. And for whatever reason, we find ourselves on this planet at this time, and this is our issue. And so, yeah, the method that I found that seems to be working for me is to work with the medicines to be able to see clearer what it is that we need to do. And for me, that's about going inwards. Yes,
fantastic. Well, I think there's definitely much to be said about the fact that there are, you know, many different ways to you know, skin a cat, as the saying goes. And I think that, you know, we need to look at this from both perspectives, you know, in terms of our own institutional level, and also as individuals, what the work that we can be doing on an individual level. And I think what Dean said about the agree, adopt and apply, I think in the first instance, if we can agree that we are the 500-year project, and that everything that is kind of directed at us is part of the machinations of the machine to keep that story going, you know, and that acknowledgement will kind of cause and debunk a lot of confusion and a lot of noise that I'm seeing online about what we should be doing next. Because then, do you know what I mean? Like then we can take the next step of, okay, what do we do with this, or what's our next move? Not necessarily as a reaction or response to that, but just in terms of managing our own well-being and our own self-determination. You know, so I think that, as I said, both approaches are, you know, they need to be done simultaneously. I know that Dean wants to just add another little another point.
And here's my take. And I agree wholeheartedly with what Akosua was saying, having taken psilocybin mushrooms myself. There is a huge metaphysical aspect to it. And based on our conditioning, we get into spookism and it is very practical. And this is why I'll speak of it like saying magic is merely the ability to shift consciousness from one state to another.
Yeah.
Just like the art of distraction with hands and sleight of hands is look at the left whilst all the machinations are happening with the right.
Yes.
So I personally don't tend to differentiate, but when I speak, a lot of what I speak about, people will derive the institutional elements. But I recently spoke about them doing Tai Chi with us in harnessing our energy. And we aren't Tai Chi masters. So we are reacting to people who are merely sending out energy and then taking our energy as we push it back. But this is all metaphysical practice, which is our original practice, which is being used on us. So I find that when I tend to slip these things into the language, those who are aware and adept with esoteric language understand, and I make it very practical as well, so it's easy to interpret. But there are those who haven't started that internal journey. So I recommend, alongside understanding intellectually, that we all go on a spiritual journey, because that reparations that we deliver to ourselves is the spiritual and psychological reparations that without, we won't even understand how to get the money, because we don't even understand that this is a metaphysical game that is being played out on us.
Yes, 100%.
So I just wanted to endorse it and say that we aren't coming from different schools of thought. It is exactly the same. My role in being a founder of an organization is just to deliver that in very practical ways, because the advisory committee are all adept men and women who understand the metaphysical components, and their role is to advise people who are professionals. So how that plays out, just like you might become a minister and not understand that this is coming from a metaphysical place high up, but there has to be a way of giving instruction where we are countering what is being done. And then two Tai Chi masters are just going backwards and forwards with energy, but then we cease to be victims.
It's in the languaging, as we said before. You know, like you said, it might miss some people who are not on that journey already, but you know, by just having the conversation, by just talking about it, I don't know how many people at 10 o'clock in the morning on a radio station are talking about these things, but you know, by introducing these concepts and you know, awakening people to the fact that we have options, the fact that there's a bigger picture. It's not just about this single reactionary situation. You know, I think each one teach one, and I think that, you know, again, thanking you both for coming on and sharing your approaches to how we address and how we can take back our power, because the main thing for me is that the fact that we're constantly being triggered and constantly, you know, like a broken record, we're just going round and round and round and being played, and not really moving forward or progressing very much. So, you know, taking on board what Akosua said, and she suggested in terms of the research, you know, nearly fully junior, looking at the 9 areas of life, you know, even, you know, listening to her show. Akosua, if you want to share about your show that they can tune into.
Yes, Fire from the Sun, every Monday, and unless it's a bank holiday, every Monday, 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m, Facebook Live, and you just put Akosua Ofusuhene.7, and that takes you to my Facebook Live on a Monday, and you can join in.
Or Fire from the Sun, and there's some really great conversations happening there. And I love what you said last time, is you said you just want to speak to white people now about race, because it is exhausting talking, you know, us having to explain everything all the time, when it's, you know, it's really them that kind of are going to be able to sort themselves out in terms of, you know.
I mean, what I meant was that I think white people should read Dr. Robin DiAngelo, the white woman who writes about whiteness.
The White Fragility book, yeah. I think, and I recommend that to all the white groups who, they all contact me, oh, yeah, would you come and do some thingy, you know, work with us? And I'm like, yeah. Read this book first, because actually I've got nothing more to really say to them than what's in this book. You know, a white woman tells them all about themselves and the ways in which they play the game. And that's all they need. They don't need 2 weeks. They don't need 4 weeks.
They just need honesty and to understand where they fit in the system. And also they just need a bit of self-forgiveness as well. You know, nobody was born creating the system. All of us have been born into the system. So absolutely. White people can kind of like relax, and if somebody says they've been racist, they need to just say, oh my God, how? Please tell me how I did it so I don't do it again. That's it. We don't need white people saying I'm not racist. How the hell do you know?
You're starting up another conversation, Aquila. If we get you back on, I get that every time.
There you go. You got to guarantee. You got to leave him on the cliff's edge.
But yeah, tell us how we can get in touch with you and the organisation ADPAC.
So the website is adpac.net. Google ADPAC volunteer, and for officers also, just Google ADPAC directors and trustees.
Fantastic. One last question in a real short sentence, please. What does or should owning it mean for us as the Black community? Very succinctly.
Go for it, Akosua.
It puts me on the spot. Own your head, own your brain, own your perceptions.
Love it.
Absolutely. Know you are sovereign with nobody else's permission. A slave between the ears is a slave, and it's merely a decision. Know that you are made up of God's substance, and all power, incidentally, just very simply, is self-appointed.
Life.
Colourful Radio.
Remember the days when we never had a dime, and our dreams seemed a million miles away. But we made it, baby, facing the bad times with a smile. Here we are, and we're growing stronger day by day, 'cause we got love, times love. It's always there for us to share. And girl, it sure feels good to know you're by my side. 'Cause we're the two high hearts that beat as one forever. With the love, times love to keep us satisfied every night. So my lady, whisper the word I love to hear. Cuddle up and I'll make you feel alright. 'Cause I need you, baby, to carry me on through all the years. So come on, baby, close the door and dim the light. 'Cause we got love, times love. It's always there for us to share. With the love, times love to keep us satisfied. And there ain't no one in this world tonight can change my point of view. So come on, girl, and hold me tight the way you always do. With love and me and you.
Live on digital radio.